Today we'll be entering the halls of Windrunner Spire, one of Midnight's newest dungeons. Without further ado, let's take a walk. While it is possible to head to a different boss first, we are going to start with Emberdawn. Starting off, tanks are going to want to keep an eye on Emberdawn's Searing Beak Tank Buster. This does high physical damage and leaves you with a nasty burn for 8 seconds. You're going to want to rotate between your defensives each time you see this cast. Next, she will target 2 players with Flaming Updraft. This will deal damage over time for 6 seconds, and any players targeted are going to want to move away from others and ideally towards the edge of the room. When this debuff expires, it's going to leave some embers on the floor. Make sure you move out of this immediately. Eventually, Emberdawn will cast Burning Gale, which summons a windstorm. First and foremost, this deals damage over 16 seconds to all party members, so healers are going to want to prepare for this damage event. During the Gale, she's also going to cast Fire Breath, which is a staggered rotating frontal. Make sure you're dodging this or you're going to take near lethal damage when combined with any of the rot damage of the Gale. The Burning Gale will also kick up the embers dropped by players earlier, causing flaming twisters to spawn and move throughout the encounter space. Make sure you're avoiding these at all costs or you're going to become stunned and take a high amount of fire damage. As you can see, this fight can quickly become a bullet hell. Luckily, this boss does retreat at 5% health. The Derelict Duo is composed of Callus and Latch, who both have different mechanics that will interact differently with your party and each other. Starting off with Callus, she's mostly going to just attempt to cast Shadow Bolt at a random player. Interrupt this when you can. Latch, on the other hand, will cast Bone Hack on the tank, which deals heavy physical damage over the course of the channel. Following this, Latch will then also cast Splattering Spew, which will target all 5 players in your party with a damage over time effect. Players are going to want to spread out before this expires. Now, once it does expire, it's going to leave growing pools of gunk splatter. Make sure you're moving out of this immediately, and healers are going to want to prepare for this damage. Now, this does start to fill up the room quite quickly, so ideally you're going to drop these pools along the walls and make your way down either side of the encounter space. Following this, Callus is then going to cast Curse of Darkness on 2 players. This curse effect will summon fixating adds that will attempt to chase down the players who are afflicted. Players who can curse a spell should try to dispel these to completely negate the mechanic, but if you don't have a dispel, you can always CC or just kite them out. Finally, the duo do have a shared mechanic moment where Callus will teleport a short distance away and start casting Debilitating Shriek. This does ramping group damage to your entire party and needs to be stopped. The only way to stop it is by using Latch's Heaving Yank mechanic. This will target a random player, and after a few seconds will have the boss attempting to hook that player, yanking them back to him. Now luckily, this can also affect Callus. The player targeted should run behind Callus to have her pulled instead of the player, which will interrupt the channel. Make sure you don't miss. After this, it's a simple rinse and repeat. Commander Kroluk is the 3rd boss of this instance, and he has 2 phases. Starting off, the boss will hit the tank with a nasty channel tank buster called Rampage. Make sure you're using a defensive when this channel starts. Kroluk will then follow this up with Reckless Leap, which targets the furthest player in your group. The player targeted will be afflicted with a nasty bleed. Healers are going to need to pay some attention to these players targeted. Now, the boss is going to do 2 leaps in total. As a small tip, I recommend a tanky range player bait the first leap away from your group, and then the tank should then move towards the furthest away point in the room to bait the second leap. This will minimize group damage and your healer will probably thank you. Now, while you're dealing with these leaps, everyone will be dodging falling rubble. Now, immediately following this, the boss is going to cast Intimidating Shout, which will require you to stack with at least 1 other player to prevent getting feared. Range and melee can create 2 separate stacks or camps, but I do recommend everyone try to move into melee if you are unsure where to go. Finally, when the boss reaches 70% and 40% health, he will cast Rallying Bellow. This deals high group damage and will summon a wave of different adds. During the intermission, the boss will also be taking virtually no damage and will continue to take reduced damage until all of the adds have been defeated. While this is happening, the boss will be fixating random players with Bladestorm. Obviously, you're going to want to avoid getting hit by this. During the intermission, there are 2 main things to focus on: interrupting the Mystic on his Chain Lightning cast, and locking down the Axe Thrower with CC as much as you can to prevent the Axe Throw bleed. Once all the adds are defeated, your group will enter first phase once again. The Restless Heart is the final encounter of this instance, and I do believe it's one of the most intense, complicated boss fights out of the entire dungeon pool, so I'm going to break this down the best I can. The start of the encounter introduces you to some of the mechanics before ramping up. Starting off the encounter, the boss will cast Arrow Rain. This spawns multiple swirls throughout the encounter space. Just avoid getting hit by these initial swirls. At the same time, all party members will be afflicted by Squall Leap. This is a permanent debuff that deals damage every 1 second. The entire fight is about managing this debuff and removing them as soon as you can. Now, the way that you do that is by moving into the arrows that spawned by the boss. By moving into an arrow, it's going to do a few things. It's going to remove the debuff. It's going to also launch that player up into the air, and it's going to spawn a soul font on the ground, which is a zone you just don't want to stand in. I highly recommend dropping your stacks early and often, as there are plenty of arrows to utilize, and you want to keep damage to a minimum. Now, following this, the boss is then going to cast Bullseye Wind Blast. This will have the boss leaping towards the opposite side of the room, or the furthest away area of the room, and begin a cast. Now, the circle of this Bullseye Wind Blast will clear any nearby arrows from play, so smart tanks can strategically position the boss near an area where there are fewer arrows. Now, once this cast finishes, it's going to spawn a Billowing Wind, which is a growing ring that you're going to need to avoid. Now, you do that by using the arrows that are on the ground in the encounter space to leap over the line. This is very similar to Vortex Pinnacle for those who played during that season. If you're hit by this ring, you're going to become stunned for 5 seconds and you're going to take nasty damage over time. Now, there are players who can use abilities like Transcendence, Blink, Demonic Circle, and Anti-Magic Shell, to name a few, to avoid having to use the arrows to avoid the ring. But it's worth noting that if you do avoid it in this manner, you're still going to need to look to drop your stack of Squall Leap. Now, following this pseudo-intermission, the fight repeats itself in this order, with 2 minor mechanics being introduced. First, there's a tank buster called Tempest Slash. This is going to knock the tank backwards, it's going to apply a permanent debuff, and cause the tank to take more physical damage. Now, tanks are going to want to use the defensive on this, and ideally get knocked into an arrow that's already on the ground, or at least near an arrow, so they can remove their debuffs as quickly as possible. Following the tank buster, the rest of your party is going to be targeted by Gust Shot, which will deal damage over time, and once the debuff expires, the Gust Shot will remove any and all soul fonts inside of each player's circle. You're going to want to use this to clear the room and give your group more space. Last but not least, the Restless Heart will target someone with Bolt Gale, which is just a large frontal cone targeting a random player, dealing damage to anyone inside of it. That player is going to ideally want to move away from others and use a small defensive. The boss is then going to repeat this order by starting with Bullseye Wind Blast and starting the sequence anew. Just remember, this fight is all about space and debuff management. If you play the long game, soon the Restless Heart will be put to rest. And that just about covers it. I hope this breakdown was helpful. If you want to see more Mythic Plus content like this in the future, feel free to subscribe. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. I do want to give a massive shout out to all my channel members and Patreon supporters, because without their support, there would be much less content like this. Good luck this season, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.